And what is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Bleacher Report app here on this beautiful Wednesday, May 29th. And look, guys, it is definitely getting into the heat of summer over here in Florida. If you guys all know, we get some pretty good weather in February, March. Then, April gets a little hotter, but now we're at the end of May and it is hot and humid outside right now. But what does hot and humid mean? That means that summertime is here. We have beach days on the way, pool days on the way. Good time to drink some beers and eat some burgers. And it also means that training camp is around the corner. And luckily, if you're a Jags fan, we all get to actually go to training camp. But now with the new Miller Electric Center, went to it last year. You get the awesome shade coverage. They got the fans that go around. It really is an awesome time. And, really, once you get to, August, September, October, there really is no better time of year because, if you are watching this stream at the end of May, you are a football diehard, okay? The casuals are not watching any kind of football coverage. They wait until September to do it. But you guys are all football diehards. And, the Jaguars football season and the NFL football season is right around the corner, and the Jaguars definitely loaded up roster-wise. And speaking of roster, that's what we're going to be kind of going through today, just building the depth chart for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So what we're going to do here, we're going to basically predict what the 53-man roster is going to look like, talk about, what positions, like who might overtake what position, whose roster position might be in danger. Maybe there might be some surprises to you guys, and especially on a defense. I think the offense, when I go through and do the offense, it's definitely a lot easier, but the defense is a lot harder because, the Jaguars have gone through a defensive scheme change where, they're going from Mike Caldwell's defense, more of like an off zone type of thing, lots of like cover three type of football into what Ryan Nielsen has, which is going to be more of a man press man type of system. The like I said, the defensive backfield is going to look a lot different. The defensive line and linebackers will have different roles. So it's, kind of tough to predict who's going to be those final men on the roster because for different reasons, and we'll get into that in the latter half of the video. But offense sells tickets. Offense is where the NFL or where Roger Goodell wants to shift things because you notice with the different rule changes and all this different stuff, it feels like every rule change almost favors the offense. And with that said, we're going to start with the offense, and we're going to start at the most important position, and that is going to be the quarterback position. Okay, right now there are three guys here. We have Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones, and CJ Beathard. Now, obviously, Trevor Lawrence is QB1. He is a lock, but the QB2 is an interesting spot. Now, for me, I truly believe that Mac Jones is a roster lock. I think no matter what, he will be on the roster. The Jaguars traded a 2024 sixth-round pick away for Mac Jones. He has 1 year left on his rookie deal after the Jaguars, rightfully so, declined his fifth-year option. And, I think that he'll definitely be on the roster. Now, the next thing is CJ Beathard. I'll be honest with you. I forgot CJ Beathard was even on the roster until I saw some videos of the quarterbacks at OTAs because for some reason I thought his contract kind of expired because we didn't really hear much about him, but he is on the roster. And the big question here is, do the Jaguars keep 3 quarterbacks or do they keep 2 quarterbacks? Me personally, I think that Beathard will not make the roster, and I think the Jaguars move forward with 2 quarterbacks. And CJ Beathard could very well be a candidate for the practice squad. Now, for me, if I'm keeping 3 quarterbacks on the roster, I want my QB1, I want a good, solid veteran QB2. And that third quarterback to me needs to be some kind of good developmental piece, kind of like a Hendon Hooker is with Detroit, or kind of like a Joe Milton is, the rookie over there for the Patriots. Somebody that has a lot of upside, but is probably 2-3 years away from being able to compete for any kind of, starting quarterback spot. And CJ Beathard definitely does not fit the bill of either of those guys. Okay. So, with him, I think that the Jaguars could easily hide him on the practice squad. And the big question here is like, look, CJ Beathard at the end of the last season, the Jaguars didn't really feel comfortable starting him. That's why they kept rolling out with an injured Trevor Lawrence. And the one game that CJ Beathard did start, we did wind up winning, but it was against the worst team in football with the Carolina Panthers. So, with the CJ Beathard, I just don't think that. I think the Jaguars made a move for Mac Jones for a reason. I think that they don't really like the kind of skill set that maybe CJ Beathard has, and he's a great guy to be in Trevor Lawrence's ear. But if injury does happen, I don't think that they see a lot of upside with CJ Beathard. So with that said, I have the Jaguars keeping two quarterbacks with Trevor Lawrence, CJ Beathard, or Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones, with CJ Beathard being that practice squad candidate. Now, next up, the wide receiver position. I have 4 locks here. I have Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr., Devin Duvernay, all as locks. You got Christian Kirk kicking out in the slot. You have Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. as your 2 outside guys. And, of course, Devin Duvernay, they brought him in here to replace Jamal Agnew in that special teams role, okay? Devin Duvernay is a very good special teams player, former Pro Bowl type of player, and, he'll be a lock to be able to make that spot. Now, for positions 5 and 6, I have Parker Washington kind of being in the backup slot role, and I have rookie Joshua Cephas, okay, from I think he's from, gosh, I forget where he's from. He's from an AAC school. I think it is University of Tennessee, Chattanooga or something. The Roadhawks. They're like an orange and blue team. I'm sorry, I forget the name, but it's a smaller school. But I have him kind of making it because, look, he's going to be able to offer special teams for the Jaguars, but he's also a big developmental piece. I mean, if he can get things working right, I think that the Jaguars could really have a steal there. And he was one of those, undrafted rookie free agents that a lot of people were excited about getting. And with that said, I have the Jaguars cutting Tim Jones and Elijah Cooks. Now, Tim Jones very well may make his way on the roster. I just think that while he may be a good special teams player, we've seen him for a couple years for the Jaguars kind of at wide receiver. And to me, he's just kind of unimpressive and doesn't have a lot of upside. But if they do want to keep him because they like his special teams ability, and most of all, at the receiver position, if they like his ability to block, that's an easy way to make your way on the roster. And then you have an Elijah Cooks. Elijah Cooks could very well make his way on a roster over a Joshua Cephas, but with that, I'm just not. That's a position that we'll really have to see play out in training camp and preseason. So as I'm sitting right here, I definitely have Joshua Cephas making a roster over them too. But one guy to look out for that could surprise some people is a Parker Washington. Now, of course, to make your way on the roster as a 5th or 6th receiver, you need to have special teams ability, okay? And I know Parker Washington, I thought he was a good punt returner, and I thought he was a really good receiver too. I mean, he made some really impressive catches last year, and I think that he'll be a good backup slot to a Christian Kirk if he were to go down. But I think he was a little bit unimpressive in kick return, and he actually got replaced by Tank Bigsby at some point in the season at kick return. So I would definitely look out for that. He's definitely not a lock to make the roster, but I actually did like his ability a lot at, slot receiver when he wasn't running wrong routes. I know he was a big reason why Trevor Lawrence got injured against the Cincinnati Bengals was him running the wrong route. And, he kind of took ownership for that. So that's a guy that a lot of people might slate that, okay, he's going to be on a roster. We don't have to think about it. But he could very well be a guy that is cut, especially when you look at, some guys, the Jaguars like Tim Jones, the Jaguars like Elijah Cooks, Joshua Cephas is a guy to look out for. All these guys could very well be, guys that couldn't make the roster. So the 5th and 6th wide receiver spots to me are definitely up for grabs. Now, this also could be with wide receiver. There could be 7 wide receivers on the roster. Usually it's only 6. Last year, the Jaguars kept 7 wide receivers, okay? And they took they took 1 running back away. They only had 3 running backs on the roster last year. However, I do have 4 running backs making the team this year. The guys that are on roster, and I really don't think there's going to be a lot of funny business here. I think that it's going to be as easy as Travis Etienne, Tank Bigsby, Dearness Johnson, and Keelan Robinson. With the Jaguars cutting, the Jaguars have 6 running backs on the roster right now. They have Jalen Jackson and Lorenzo Lingard. Both of these guys are undrafted rookie free agents, so could be a possibility where one of them really, really impresses. But they do have investments in a lot of these guys. I mean, you look at Etienne, he will be the bell cow. You have Tank Bigsby, who, the Jaguars invested a third round pick in him last year. And, with Tank Bigsby, we are going to see, I think, a lot of him in the preseason. He is going to be, I think, get 20 plus touches in each of the first two preseason games and probably even some touches in a third preseason game. Last year he was honestly a liability when he was on the field, just fumbling a lot, leading to a lot of turnovers. And maybe a lot of that came from the fact that he just didn't have enough experience and just flat out wasn't ready to play. And I know a lot of people are ready to write him off. I don't really do that with players until really their third season. I need to see 2 seasons of play out of them before I really start to get hypercritical of, draft picks. I know last year I gave Luke Fortner a chance. That didn't really work out. And this year, when it comes to guys that the Jaguars drafted in the 2023 NFL draft, you look at Tank Bigsby, you look at Britton Strange. Both those guys look a little bit questionable right now. But, we'll have to revisit this at the end of the year to really determine, okay, are they really bad or were they actually good, just needed a couple years of development? So with the Tanks Bigsby, really, really rooting for him. And, like I said, I think the Jaguars drafted him because they liked him a lot, but we'll just have to see. And you have Dearness Johnson, who with Tank Bigsby's struggles last year, really filled in well with the RB2 spot. I think he's a perfect depth piece, and he's a guy that, quite frankly, I really do trust with the football. And had a good year last year, was really good for the Browns when called upon. I remember he didn't really get that many opportunities, but there was a Thursday night football game where both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt were injured and couldn't play, and Dearness Johnson went out there and killed it. And I know that because I had Nick Chubb in fantasy, picked up Dearness Johnson last minute, and got a lot of fantasy points. And there's really not there's a few really, really good feelings in football. One of them is if you're a fantasy football person and your player goes off on a Thursday night. Okay, it's just a really good way to enter your Friday and into your football weekend. So, and then lastly, you have Keelan Robinson, who raised a lot of eyebrows when the Jaguars drafted him in the 5th round of the 2024 NFL draft. But, the kickoff rules have changed a lot. Okay, there are different rules coming to kickoffs where nowadays, you're probably going to see a 2 kick returner look as they kind of adopt the XFL system. I'm really interested to see how it looks. And of course, we'll get a look in the preseason. They're on a 1-year trial period with it. But I imagine they probably do adopt it because I think that the NFL doesn't like just throwaway plays. Kick returns lately have just kind of been a waste of time because mostly they result in touchbacks. We saw 5, 6, 7 years ago when the extra point was just too close, so decided to back it up a little bit to make that a little bit more interesting. The NFL is all about changing rules and changing things to make every play just a little more interesting. So we'll see how that works. But with that said, kicker became a lot more important. So the Jaguars drafted the kicker, and kick returner becomes important. So it'll probably be Devin Duvernay and Keelan Robinson back there returning. And I actually do think that, Tank Bigsby might be in competition to potentially be back there. Last year, the Jaguars, like I said, when Parker Washington was struggling a little bit, they put a Tank Bigsby back there in place of Parker Washington to kind of get some kick returns in. So definitely something to look at. And the Jaguars invested a lot in special teams this offseason between getting 2 new kick returners and getting a new kicker. So let's see how all that plays out. Now, next up at tight end, I had the Jaguars keeping 3 tight ends similar to last season. I had the Jaguars keeping Evan Ingram, Britton Strange, and Luke Farrell, with the Jaguars cutting Doug Peterson's son, Josh Peterson, also Shane Bowen, and also Josh DeGuara from the Green Bay Packers, and Patrick Murtaugh. So, last year I really thought the Jaguars were going to keep 4 tight ends, but they wound up cutting Garrett Prince, who I thought had a really good preseason. But if any of these guys go down, look, Evan Ingram had just a tremendous 2023 season, and I'm seeing a lot of metrics come out that, he was like one of the best catchers out there. I think actually the best catcher with a player that had over 100 targets last season. I think he was one of 6 tight ends to ever finish a season with over 100 receptions. It was a crime that he didn't finish in any like all pro positions. But as Jaguars fans, we all know the vibes. We're Jacksonville. We had to have a guy have a stellar season, like a historic NFL season for a player to even be mentioned in a Pro Bowl. And I think Evan Ingram didn't even make the Pro Bowl. I think it was like a situation where he got called up because of a reserve situation. Yeah, because only Ross Matzik, Jaguars long snapper, and Josh Allen actually got into the Pro Bowl. So it's crazy, man. It's crazy. And of course, Britton Strange, a player that was a second-round pick in last year's NFL draft, going into his second NFL season. Like to see some development out of him. And Luke Farrell, a former sixth-round pick in Urban Meyer's draft in 2021, going into the last year of his contract, who's always been a solid player for the Jaguars. You know, pretty good at blocking and pretty good at catching as well when needed to. So I think it's pretty relatively straightforward there. We'll see when it comes to competition. I just think that any of these guys the Jaguars cut, they can put to the practice squad, and if anybody gets hurt, they can call them up easily. I don't really see any of these players really getting sniped from the Jaguars. Now, offensive line. We'll start off with the starting 5. We have Cam Robinson at left tackle, Ezra Cleveland at left guard, Mitch Morse at center, Brandon Sheriff at right guard, and Anton Harrison at right tackle. Really, last year we had some competition at, primarily left guard and also left tackle in a way. But now, like, this is relatively straightforward. There's really no competition for the starting offensive line. It's just mainly who's going to battle for depth. Now, right now, we have actually really good tackle depth between Walker Little and Javon Foster. So I have both those guys making it as backup tackles. Now, the big thing is interior offensive line. The Jaguars will keep around Luke Fortner because he was a relatively high draft pick for the Jaguars. You have Tyler Shatley, who is quietly going into a lot of years for the Jaguars. I mean, he was an undrafted rookie free agent in 2014. So he's going into his 11th season. He's turning into one of the longest tenured Jaguars ever as he keeps on signing these 1-year, 2-year deals with the Jaguars. The T-Shat 69 I got making the roster as well. We have Cooper Hodges. He was a 6th or 7th round pick in the 2023 NFL draft, injured most of the season. So, I have those guys really being the backup players, with the Jaguars keeping 10 offensive linemen, with Cole Van Lanen and Blake Hance kind of being the first 2 cut, but I could see those guys definitely being practice squad. And shout out to Pondo in the chat. It says, feels like the offensive line will be super important for you guys this year. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's important for any team, and especially the Jaguars are hyper-focused on it since we had a lot of bad injury luck last year with especially the interior of the offensive line, and just honestly, Luke Fortner not developing at all. And, we saw what happened when Trevor Lawrence got hurt. Trevor Lawrence got hurt, running game got exposed, everything just went south, and we got to hope to avoid that again next season. So next up, defense. We have at linebacker 5 linebackers, and like I said, this is a position that's really, really hard to project because we don't know what the defense will really look like under a Ryan Nielsen, but I am definitely excited for it. But I had the Jaguars keeping 5 linebackers with Oluokun and Lloyd as their starting interior linebackers. Lloyd is a guy who's really projected for a huge breakout season. He apparently is in great shape, and look, he was a first-round pick and really hasn't lived up to the hype, but was it because of a scheme thing? But I am definitely excited to see a Devin Lloyd in a new defense. We have Chad Muma rounding out as the first kind of linebacker off the, I guess, depth chart when it comes to if Oluokun or Lloyd get injured. But Oluokun is a guy that stays very, very healthy. Lloyd has been nicked up a little bit the last couple of years, so we'll see. And then the last 2 guys, I have Caleb Johnson and Ventrell Miller. Caleb Johnson was like an undrafted guy who the Jaguars have liked for some time. He keeps making the roster, very good special teamer. The Jaguars have been keeping him around for a long time. And Ventrell Miller was a 4th-round pick in last year's draft, but I think it was an Achilles tear that happened during training camp last year or preseason, and he was shelved for the entire year. I know a lot of Gator fans like him. He was Went to the University of Florida, also played at Lakeland over here in Central Florida as well. So, we'll see when it comes to that, but I can't imagine will we keep 5 or 6 linebackers? I feel like this is probably pretty straightforward here. Now, next up, I had the Jaguars keeping 5 cornerbacks. And real quick shout out to Ray Charles. He says, I hope defensively they put Walker's hand in the dirt more. And yeah, we'll discuss that a little bit more when we get to the defensive line. So we're going to bring out to the secondary. We have 5 cornerbacks making the roster with a Tyson Campbell, Ronald Darby as your starting outside guys, Jerrion Jones as your starting nickel, and then Monteric Brown and DeAndre Prince as your backups on the outside. Now, some guys that would be cut is Tavon Campbell, Christian Braswell, Trey Flowers, and Eric Hallett II. With this, the big question here is, what do the Jaguars do at nickel cornerback spot? Now, Doug Peterson went out and said that Savage will be the Jaguars' nickel cornerback, but with the way this defense looks, it's a little bit hard for me to believe. I just feel like you drafted Jerrion Jones in the 3rd round to be a starting nickel, and I feel like with a Darnell Savage, he is going to get some training at nickel and at safety, and he'll be probably more of a depth spot or maybe have more of a role for the defense. Like in certain packages, he'll kind of come in and play. But with this, I have these guys making the roster, and kind of Savage being, like I said, a hybrid. If Jerrion Jones gets hurt, he'll be the starting nickel. If an Antonio Johnson or something like that gets hurt, he'll be starting at safety back there. And I feel like maybe in certain packages, like if the Jaguars go in dime, he'll have a role there. We'll see. I mean, we don't know because Ryan Nielsen, we're bringing in a whole new defense, but I do think that the Jaguars paid him some money, so there'll be a role for him on a team. So now we'll transition over to safety. We have 5 safeties making the roster, which is a little bit different because usually the Jaguars have kept 4 safeties, and it's actually been the same 4 safeties for the 2021, 2022, and 2023 seasons, where you've had Andre Cisco, you've had Andrew Wingard, and Daniel Thomas. So I have, and you also had, you had Rayshon Jenkins also out there too. So those are your 4 safeties for 3 seasons in a row. But now I have, Antonio Johnson replacing Rayshon Jenkins as a starting safety. And then I have the Jaguars kind of keeping on Darnell Savage, like I said, to kind of play that hybrid role. So Cisco going into a contract year for him. Will it be a competition between Antonio Johnson versus Darnell Savage, or will it be a competition between Jerrion Jones versus Darnell Savage? That's something we'll only really know when training camp comes. Like I said, Doug Peterson said that Darnell Savage will be the nickel, but that's coach speak. You just kind of had to listen to what coaches say and interpret it your own way, because we're all football fans. We're all watching this at the end of May. We're football diehards, okay? We're football degenerates, okay? So we all know what coach speak is, and we kind of interpret things for ourselves. Now, next up, we'll go to the defensive line. I have 3 outside linebacker / edges making the roster. I have Josh Allen, Trayvon Walker, and Travis Gibson. Now, the big question here is, look, I have Yasir Abdullah getting cut, and the big reason why is this: I don't know what the defense is going to look like. I don't know what the defensive line is going to look like. What kind of role will Yasir Abdullah play? We didn't see a lot from him. He couldn't crack. He was basically a healthy scratch all season last year, and he just never really played. He couldn't get past Chase on the depth chart. So how does he look as an edge rusher? I would like to sit here and think that he's been training all offseason to kind of be that next guy, but it's very important to get playing time. He didn't really get a lot of that, and especially now, I think the Jaguars do plan on putting Devin Lloyd at the line of scrimmage a little bit more to rust the passer. So will he almost be like, the Jaguars' 4th edge rusher in some senses? I don't know. And another guy to look out for is Miles Cole, big old dude from Texas Tech, who the Jaguars drafted in the 7th round. I'm just not sure if he's developed enough to be able to make the Jaguars roster. So we'll see how the Jaguars keep in 3 outside linebackers / edges. Shout out to Jags_M says, you went to my high school, Fleming Island till I die, class of 2014. Let's go. Class of 2012, baby. Duval till we die. I guess Clay County till we die, but we're all Duval, Nassau, St. Johns County, Clay County. We're all a part of Duval. Okay. All right. So next up, we have 7 interior defensive linemen making the roster between Eric Armstead, Roy Robertson Harris, Mason Smith, Devon Hamilton, Jordan Jefferson, Tyler Lacey, and Jeremiah Ledbetter. I have Adam Gotsis getting pushed off the roster and maybe making a practice squad as a first kind of guy that the Jaguars call out. And look, this is a position group that the Jaguars invested a lot in, okay? Paid Eric Armstead a lot of money, invested a second-round pick into Mason Smith from LSU. Speaking of LSU, you also get Jordan Jefferson in the 4th round. And, the Jaguars straight up got bullied last year on the both trenches, on the interior of the offensive line and interior of the defensive line, and they invested a lot in each unit, okay? So Eric Armstead, a free agent signing that I loved. The Jaguars just, quite frankly, got a lot bigger and a lot meaner at this spot. And, I'm an old school football head. Even though I'm a young guy, I'm an old head when I think that the game of football is won and lost at the line of scrimmage. I've said that for so many years. And we saw it play out in real time last year when the Jaguars got a little bit injured at those spots and just got completely demolished at the end of last season, where we looked like the second worst team in football behind the Panthers, because we did happen to beat the Panthers, our only win in our final 6 games of the year, and it was just embarrassing. So luckily the Jaguars invested both money and draft capital to that spot to be able to make it a lot better. And say what you want about Mason Smith. You invested honestly a second round pick into a premium position. And if you look at the second and third round picks this year versus last year, this year you drafted a defensive lineman and a cornerback. Okay. Last year you drafted a blocking tight end and a running back. So you're seeing a lot better positional value at your draft picks this year than you are last year. So that should be pretty exciting. Now, lastly, to round it out, the easiest one to determine is special teams. Okay. Punter Logan Cook had a great year last year and just a really solid kicker or punter for the Jaguars. Ross Matzik, Pro Bowler, baby. He's making the team at long snapper. I don't know if for a long snapper, I don't know if they make the Pro Bowl because, you don't really see that many bad long snaps, but he did force a fumble on one punt this year, which is very, very rare from a Pro Bowler. So I'm not sure if just one play elevated him up to a Pro Bowler, but love you, man. Seems like a cool dude too. And we got kicker Cam Little. Okay. Cam Little Appreciation Day, as we had another dude by the name of Brandon McManus get in some trouble this week from, I'm not going to say it on stream, but you guys all kind of know what happened there on the flight to London. And, 2 females are suing both him and the Jaguars for his actions while on a flight. It's a big bonk for him. So yeah, Cam Little. Actually, when we drafted Walker Little, it's like, oh, how ironic his name is Walker Little when he's huge. But Cam Little is actually very, very little. I mean, he's smaller than Riley Patterson, but big leg. I was hearing reports that he was kicking, making kicks that could have been good from 60+ yards. So that's all good to see. But yeah, with that said, that is my 53-man roster breakdown. That is some information about the depth chart. Really excited to see this training camp, and really a lot of eyes will be on the defense because, that's where some interesting spots are going to be. And when it comes to the offense, I think wide receiver 5, 6, maybe 7 will be one interesting thing to see. So with all that said, thank you guys so much for being here and joining the Bleacher Report app. Really appreciate all your guys' support. And like I said, stay tuned into the Bleacher Report app. Get your notifications on, as we're going to keep you updated with all your different Jaguars news and updates. And with all that said, appreciate you guys for being here. Enjoy the rest of your week, and go Jags.